The lights of the Ferris wheel glittered like captured stars against the twilight sky. Below it, the calliope played a jaunty tune as it spun slowly. Its beams cut through the growing darkness, throwing dancing patterns across the ground and onto the wide-eyed faces of children. This traveling carnival had only been set up for 2 days outside of Derry, but already the whole town seemed to be there. Eddie Kasprak adjusted his glasses and tugged on Beverly Marsh's sleeve, hoping she'd take the hint and stop gawking at the wheel of chance. But Bev wasn't looking at the wheel of chance. Her eyes were fixed on something else in the shadows. She was staring at the house of mirrors, which was empty, but not for long. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first group of kids ran into the house. Eddie held back, clutching his asthma inhaler. The mirrors had always freaked him out, and that was before he learned how dangerous they could be. It hadn't been that long ago, actually, just over a year, that he and his friends had found out the hard way that the funhouse at the carnival was no fun at all. Each time they entered, they vanished, only to reappear moments later in a dark, dank room filled with dirt, rocks, and dead animals. It turned out that the owner of the carnival had been abducting children from Derry for years, trapping them in a pocket dimension inside the funhouse until they eventually died. They found the bodies of several children inside the funhouse, including a young girl who'd been missing for months. And it was the last straw for Eddie. He never wanted to see the inside of a funhouse again. But now here he was, standing outside the mirror maze, because Bev had convinced him to come after her. If he didn't come, she'd go alone, and Eddie couldn't let her do that. He took another deep breath and started walking towards the entrance. As they walked past the barker, he gave them both an oily grin. His name tag read Sparky. As they entered the house of mirrors, the sounds of the carnival faded away. All around them, mirrors reflected distorted versions of themselves, multiplied endlessly, winking in and out of existence. Some of the reflections smiled wickedly. Others seemed to scream in terror. A few showed Pennywise, his red hair glowing in the darkness. The kids who'd gone in ahead of them were nowhere to be seen. Bev and Eddie exchanged nervous glances and hurried deeper into the maze. They passed a 3-way mirror, the reflections multiplying until there were 6 of them. 2 Bevs and 2 Eddies, the rest some grotesque parodies of themselves. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, and then they heard a voice. "Hello, Georgie." Eddie grabbed Bev's arm. He didn't like the sound of that voice. He knew that voice. That voice belonged to Pennywise. "Did you bring your paper boat?" The voice was closer now, right behind them. Eddie could feel the heat of Pennywise's breath on his neck. He whirled around, but there was nothing there. Only his own reflection stared back at him, distorted and wavering. "Don't look behind you, Eddie," Bev whispered urgently. "Look forward." Eddie nodded dumbly. How could he have been so stupid? Of course, Pennywise would be hiding behind them. That was the trick with mirrors. What Eddie didn't understand was why Pennywise was even here. The losers had killed him. He shouldn't be alive. And if he wasn't, then this wasn't really Pennywise at all. This was just some imposter using Pennywise's voice and shape. Right, that made perfect sense. An imposter. But as they moved on, more distorted figures appeared in the mirrors. A boy holding a red balloon. A man with a hook for a hand. A woman in a Victorian nightgown. Eddie stopped. Was that Margaret White? No, it couldn't be. She'd died in the fire at the Losers Club hideout. But if it wasn't her, then who was it? Suddenly, the lights flickered and all the mirrors went dark, plunging them into total blackness. A strangled scream tore through the silence, followed by a burst of maniacal laughter. Then the lights came back on, and the mirrors flickered back into existence. But what had been there before was gone. The boy with the balloon, the man with the hook, the woman in the nightgown. In their place stood Pennywise. And he wasn't alone. Standing behind him were the kids who'd disappeared, their eyes glazed over, their mouths twisted into grotesque smiles. And when they opened their mouths to speak, Eddie saw their teeth were long and sharp and yellowed, and they smelled like death. They were Pennywise's minions now, or maybe they'd been his all along. Either way, they weren't friendly. The one who'd called Georgie stepped forward. He looked no older than 7. "Would you like to play with us, Eddie?" he asked, his voice dripping with false sweetness. Eddie backed away. "No, thanks," he stammered. "I don't want to play with you." "Oh, but you will," said Pennywise, his voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You have no choice." Another kid stepped forward, a girl with pigtails and a vacant stare. "We're going to play hide and seek," she said. "And you're going to hide." Eddie felt a chill crawl up his spine. Hide and seek. That was how it always started. First they lured you in with promises of fun and games. Then they took you away, and you never came back. He needed to get out of there, and fast. He pushed past the girl and raced down a mirrored hallway. Behind him, he heard the others laughing and calling after him, their voices echoing endlessly. He burst through a pair of double doors and into a small, stuffy room. Eddie leaned against the door, trying to catch his breath. There had to be another way out, maybe through this room. But as he looked around, he saw that it was a dead end. On the far wall, a single mirror hung crookedly, winking in and out of existence. Eddie hesitated. Should he look? What if Pennywise was waiting behind that mirror? But what if he wasn't? Eddie felt a sudden surge of defiance. Let Pennywise come. If he wanted to play hide and seek, then let him find Eddie Kasprak. He stared directly into the mirror, willing Pennywise to appear. "Well, well, well," said a familiar voice behind him. "Look what we have here." Eddie whirled around, his heart pounding, but Pennywise wasn't there. "He's gone," said Bev's voice. "He's not in any of the mirrors." Eddie saw her standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "Then where is he?" "Eddie," whispered. She shook her head, her lips pale against her white skin. "I don't know," she said, "but we need to get out of here." Together, they searched the room, but there was no other way out. They were trapped. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the mirror on the wall went dark. Eddie and Bev pressed their faces against the cold glass, peering into the inky black abyss. The air grew heavy and cold, and then they heard a voice. "Hello, Georgie," it said. "Did you bring your paper boat?" But this time it wasn't behind them. It was inside the mirror. With a jolt, they realized it wasn't just a mirror. It was a portal, and Pennywise was coming for them.